Well, good afternoon, everyone. I hope you enjoyed your enthusiastic lunch. It gave me a bit of flashback to my Navy days of seeing some interesting fish thrown in with baked beans and some other stuff. That was always pretty much what the Navy used to do, open as many tins of food as you can, throw them in, boil them to perfection, and then serve it. So, always good. So, what am I here to talk to you about today? Even though we're actually talking about AWS and we're talking about cloud services and log analytics, I must stress that this is actually applicable to everything. And from my experience, and I'll give you a bit of an introduction from my viewpoint, we really have kind of done the wrong thing with logs. And we'll go into a little bit about that later. So from my experience, first of all, I will apologize. I am a very, very strange person. I joined up in 2002 as a nuclear ballistic missile submariner, as a crypto officer and as a communications officer. The longest I spent underwater was 138 days. I then left that after 2 years to do something slightly less dangerous and went into bomb disposal for 5 years. So I didn't say I was smart. After that, though, if you do any open source intelligence against me, in 2006, my ship crashed in Norway. I must stress I wasn't driving. However, they gave me a good recommendation for incident response. So the Norwegian government asked, would you like to come and work for them? I said no. They said, we'll pay you 3 times as much. I went, okay, let's go. And I set up one of the co-sponsors to set up the cyber warfare division for the Royal Norwegian Navy. And as a civilian at the start, and then I got a commission from the King of Norway to lead 9 warships to hunt pirates in Somalia for 9 months. So during the day as an intelligence officer and chief information security officer, and then in the evening as a battle watch commander. After that, my next promotion was going to be a desk, so I decided to do something else. So I wanted to see what real psychological warfare is like. So I went to the University of Cambridge as the head of cybersecurity to see how academics do warfare. And I have to admit that's more cutthroat than any military I've ever seen. After doing that for 3 years, I then moved to Estonia to do more exciting, more pragmatic things, and also trying to not repeat the same mistakes and the same kind of ethos we were doing, the tick box to security routine, which became pretty much my routine part of job, and to actually look at the issues in hand. But one of the key parts I learned from my very start of my naval days was actually about fires. If the ship identified when a fire was going off less than 30 seconds, and we knew it was going to happen, and we responded correctly, we knew the ship would be saved. We had to know all of the stuff that was happening before it, in little indicating factors, but within 30 seconds, it's saved. Over 30 seconds, we've lost the ship, even if it is just a waste bin fire. The same applies to any incident. You need to know very early on, when you have a cyber attack, what are you looking at? Can you actually get the information you need? And can you act quickly? Do you know the information? Do you get it in time? They're the only key things you really need. The rest of it will come naturally. And this brings us to logs. First of all, while we may have moved to this lovely cloud infrastructure, let's be honest, it is exactly the same as before. It's just the cable is longer. Did people check logs in the first place? No. People check logs when there's an incident. People check logs after the event, after the indicator. And what we've now got with this new cloud structure, and for the one we're picking here is AWS, with S3, you've got no problem with storage in terms of storing these logs. This is great. You can whack in as much as you want. But do you know what you're looking for? Have you looked at the data? Do you actually know what's irregular? And I used this example earlier because we laugh at them for doing these. You've heard this, the British Telecom the phishing campaign. They phone up old people and say, your Windows machine has been compromised. if you open the event viewer log on your Windows machine and they walk them through it, and then it opens up the event log and it's got thousands of critical errors, and it gives them confirmation. So the person that you're doing the spear phishing campaign for, the victim says, I'm looking at this, you told me there are errors, there are critical errors. Yes, I now need your help to sort this out. We do this in incident response, because when we're looking at the logs and we've got incidents and it's all going wrong, have we actually ever looked at that log before? Are they just SQL calls that failed? Are they just error messages that were always there? And now all of a sudden, rather than focusing our attention on really what's happening, are we just fixing things that were never broken in the first place? So this is the kind of mindset of how to change this works. But what's quite interesting with the way the structure is changed by going into the cloud is a lot of people actually know how AWS logging works. There is a real kind of in-depth skill change you need to learn. It's very easy to use. It's hard to set up correctly. And setting up that correctly aspect is so important. And at SpectX, we have found that there are a number of logs that have been dumped publicly that should definitely have not been dumped publicly. We're talking emails, voicemails, things that could be easily extracted from a public viewpoint. And these are not just from 2-bit small companies, these are tier 1 companies. Mission critical stuff, but they're not understanding how it works. So we're going to use, as our example today, our own public bucket with 20 million blobs. It's from 2017 to 2019, but it's not too big, but it's an all right sample size just to show how we can work this out. So for those that always love reading an indicator of a log, this is the structure of that particular, the log format. Quite standard, normal, but again, an awful lot of them. And they are well documented. And by well documented, I mean quite documented. And by quite documented, we mean, it might not be as good as you think. But if we have a look at it as it's much easier, obviously now we all understand it, don't we? It's all good. When we look at the regex, this is how we have to pass it. So if you're using Athena, or if you're trying to put it in a human-readable format, this is the unique expression that we need. Obviously, you would never notice if you would all spot that there's a wrong comma in there or wrong speech mark. We're all very, very clear with this. The problem starts to occur, however, when the well-documented format, where they definitely said in March 2019 that it would not change, changed. We know this because using Wayback Machine, we can look back at the manual and the core format of what they were storing their logs was altered. They did state that they would only just add extra fields. But now we know it's altered. If you're trying to pass this data that's historic with the new rule set, you're going to get invalid results. It's not an accurate way to recall what happened previously. This generally does happen in organizations like Google or anything because it is a very agile workplace. I've never seen Gmail ever be anything other than beta. But, because of that structured change, when you look back, you have to take these things into consideration. And your past scripts won't work. They'll start balking out or other particular tools that you can use. On SpectX, for our side, when we've chuck this data in, it becomes more nice, more fluffy and human readable, so we can actually understand what's going on. But of course, we want to develop this further and make it in a more structured mindset so we can actually then flow it in and we can do proper analytics out of this. So as you can see on here, we're starting to get all of the buckets whacked in, and we're now filtering for the important files we actually want to look for. Once we start to collect all this data, we can then start playing around with it, which then gets me to a point of, before we start looking at files, something you really need to get your security teams to do. One of the first bits I mentioned at the start is you need to know what normal is. Don't just get people looking at your logs after an incident. Get them looking at the logs for fun. Play around with it. See actually what your systems do. I found looking at the university that I also work for, our single sign-on system has always worked. So we never looked at it. It just worked. Magic. Single sign-on. It's all good. But then actually doing analytics of how it worked, if we did have an incident on that particular system, all of the Estonians were being saved into the English database, and all of the English people were being saved into the Estonian database due to a typo. None of us would have known this. None of us would have even looked at that. But we had a play. And the more you get to know and experience your system, the more you actually really understand what's underlying in it. And the way on how it's done in AWS is you have the one region, and within that, it is then more smaller files that were lobbed in there. So if we have a look at the maths, there's 10 million blobs, we have 20 million log records, and we have 6 million logs within that, the files which we can start doing analytics on. So where do the problems start to come? Well, first of all, I don't know, I think I have to tell you this really. AWS is a rather large company. They kind of do an awful lot of stuff. And when you're running your own box, you're used to the logs being saved and being recalled at a relatively minor pace. And in some cases in AWS, this is true. In some cases, it is not. Further though, there is some interesting irregularities of how far it can be from when the event was created to when the record is actually reported to you. Quite a lot of difference, which we will come into later. But as you can see, if we take EU West 1, from the bucket loads, it's normally about 22,000 files an hour, which is the average of how much it is throwing and putting it into this after the response. That is a lot of requests. So when we're doing the best effort approach to do this, there is a little bit of an offset. So if we look at the on all of the logs that's coming in on here, the average shipping time from actually when the event is done to when it's posted, so where you can actually do any analytics or even read it, is 65 minutes. The best case is 17 minutes. That is quite slow, really. But we can then take it a little bit further. We can calculate the best time to actually launch the attack. Because by taking this data set and then analyzing it and working out if there are any historical patterns, I think we can see that there is quite a bit of correlation on this map here. We can see that if you start to do it, you'll launch your attack just after 0 minutes on the hour. You have 71 minutes until that event is actually recorded, until you can actually even find out that incident is happening. Now, if I remind you to back of my analogy with the ship, we knew in 30 seconds, if you got some of these indicating knowledges, you could work out how to deal with the incident. 71 minutes is pushing the boat out. You're no longer dealing with, is somebody trying to intrude into your system? It's, okay, what have they got? Because they're definitely in there and definitely something's happening. Have they improved? No. I think there's a quick, easy one on this slide. We've taken it back from the start of when we start to collect this data to current day. And as you can see, the correlation is still quite clear from 2017 to 2018 to 2019. Two different colors. It is pretty consistent. So for hackers in the audience, if you're going to launch an attack, do it after 0, 0. If you're trying to fix it, for the love of God, definitely make sure you're paying attention at 71 minutes afterwards, because you have a window of where something can happen. However, I must stress on behalf of all of the places I represent, please do not hack AWS because of this talk. But nevertheless, it is definitely there. However, I did say there were some anomalies in this, and this one is quite interesting. The longest I was on a nuclear submarine was 138 days. I know that feels like a ridiculous long time, whereas this was 237 days for it to report the incident happening, the actual indicator, to actually being reported to you. That is a huge gap in log delivery from start to actually where you can get to see it. And as we all know, CEOs are always very, very nice and friendly when you say that you've got 237 days and it was a technical error of why you didn't know something happened. Is this a big problem? On a grand scale, no. On the 237-day thing, it was only 0.0008% over 14 days. However, it's still a problem. It still exists. And you need to make sure that you can work out that this is actually possible. You know, it could be the fact that you cannot trust your logs. What can you do to kind of mitigate this? To work out how you can better improve your response, or to understand in your log why you can't always 100% trust it. The way that we have to use logs is logs are not to confirm if you haven't been hacked. You need to use logs to confirm that there is no chance you've been hacked. And if you've got big gaps in your data, or even small gaps in your data, you need to know about them to further make sure that you actually are secure and watertight. The example I always used to use, we had a vulnerable system at one of the universities I worked in for 4 years. We had 6 months worth of logs. So my chief information security officer said, well, it's never been attacked. I checked the 6 months worth of logs. To which went, congratulations, but the 3 years, 6 months where we have no logs probably might be an area we might want to have a concern on. And because the vulnerability was so old, the possibility that no one's attacked it in 6 months is because they don't think we're that crap. So not a great security posture to have. But also, the way that the structure can happen within the log formatting, it can also not return back results because it's not actually getting both sides of the story. A put request needs a get request. If it's missing one, there's a mismatch, it doesn't give you the feedback. It then comes as a misreport in the log. And as you can see, when we checked on our own data, that was public. We had 15 in 2017 and then 14 in 2019. This mismatch between the put and the get could also, of course, be an attack vector. It could be someone has just altered the string to actually make this not appear into our logs. So if we have a look at this, we're just using the agent handler here, just using curl. If we then alter the actual sample entry before we actually start to input anything into the log to try and check it, and in this case, you can see we just altered something in the strings to end the syntax and then kind of break it. This then drops it. There's no report in the log. Just by doing that, it's no longer actually following the set structure in order for it to report back. That is rather simple in order to break the string and make this no longer move forward. So as you can see, we will be publishing a paper on this, and it will be on our blog. Please follow us, SpecTex Lab. But surely this must have been reported before, because this is something that if you don't trust your logs, just like when I was in the Navy, your ship's log is your friend. Ship's log is what gets you out of trouble. You can always refer to that and go, this is my get out of jail free card. I made this decision because log told me to. But it has been reported. This was reported back in 2012, and it wasn't taken very seriously. You can only do an act in accordance with how your logs tell you what happened. We don't have mystery magic technology yet, no matter what a number of these firewall companies tell me. The magic box technology is yet to be invented. But how can we then make this work? Well, let's just do a simple question, which may arrive anywhere. The question is, has anyone downloaded our database.backup.sql during the last 2 years when it was public? It's a very, very simple question, and one that could be very much asked by any security person to ask me, can you prove if anyone's actually downloaded this breach database? So in this environment, this is a PID database that we have. So, as my budding SOC specialist would do, they would Google analyze S3 access logs, and they would come up to this lovely, shiny page of how do I analyze Amazon S3 server access logs using Athena, to which they would go to their help page and tell them how to do it. So we then, using SpecTex here, we're running the query. Sorry? Oh, I think yes. Sorry, yeah, mix the two up. Seeing for the results, and we get 0 records returned. So there's no indication of compromise. Everything's A-OK. I do know a few security professionals that would that do like to use this approach of it told me everything is fine, so everything's A-OK. Let's move on. But I do like to prefer to use tools and ways to actually work out if we really are in the clear. And as you can see, going back to this slide again, it is a beautiful structure, very, very easy for us to understand. But once we start then using that data and parse it in other ways to check to see if it's been broken, we can then identify that there may be a mismatch. Oh, it's gone on. Oh, yes, there we go. So, as you can see now, we've run the same query. It has come back with 0 results, but there is a slight mismatch there. It's definitely saying that something hasn't gone right with this. Half of the packets have been dropped and is no longer producing this within the log. But we can then start to see how far it did get until it was balked out. Until we can actually see somebody had altered that string, just changing it enough in order for it to give us a 0 result at the start. We can now start producing actual data to see who really's got it. Now, we are losing data still because it's not in a correct format, apart from we do have the things that you'd probably want to answer on that question. Who actually downloaded it? What timestamp? When? Where? Which then starts to help. It gives you a small string to follow in terms of to investigate how we can go further on this. The big problem we do have is we don't like to look at our logs. We don't actually like to look at the small bits of information that tell us what's going on. We like to look at loud and proud, the thing that gives you all of the critical analytics and everything that's going wrong and everything there. But as you can see, just using this structure, we can start to get an indication of where this data was downloaded. And then to actually do the real investigation rather than either doing the other two, which is everything's A-OK, I can't see anything, or everything is chaos, everything is panicking. So there is going to be a full technical documentation that will be on this. If you follow the SpecTex lab, we will post that, and it will be a nice, interesting read, complete with lovely data. My lovely colleague Lene will be also very available for the advanced paper that he's written. It's really particularly impressive. From my side, the reason I actually I've got 5, 6 jobs. I work at Cambridge University. I work at Defence Academy for the United Kingdom, Caltech University, and I also occasionally run around and try and break into warships, but that's another question over there. But one of the reasons that I actually asked SpecTex to go and do their stuff is it's one of the greatest systems I've seen to actually look at logs. And from my time as a incident responder, it's the thing that always saved me, was actually knowing what on earth is going on in my system. I did like the previous talk. If you heard the Sizo's dilemma, the never-ending circle, you don't get that in universities. We break at the first hurdle. We don't have any money. So we had to do everything by love and Python scripting and by just hoping for the best and trying to manipulate that data. However, I must stress that's not a good way to follow either. You just end up with grey hair at 26. But with this, once you do get to see what's going on to your underlining, you can understand to fix your real problems rather than just magic firewall technology, which we all know is award-winning until it goes wrong. If you would like any questions or anything, please send me an email, and we'll be here for a couple more hours as well if you want any interesting stuff. But other than that, just any questions and I'll leave it to you.
For other services, so like that travel. Yeah. This is interesting. Most of the AWS services are doing exactly the same thing. So the latest one is very popular. There's one exception. It's Athena logs. And my guess is that Athena is the only team who actually analyzes this data. And they were tired of waiting another hour and a half and they did something and they want to analyze and then they got exceptions. So now Athena logs are running between 5 and 10 minutes through the cloud.
And just one additional thing. So background, so S3 capability is access loading by this environment and modules. Background also has the S3 object, layer object.
Yeah, but in cloud ready, you have a quite limited set of S3 related activities. So in the cloud ready mode, you get only if someone is getting list of
so I think there's another background S3 data and you have to create an object with object calls.
Okay.
And I'm just wondering like if anyone else and like the relationship between those ones. There's lots of well-structured,
Yes, but doing in the tissue logs is another topic because it gives flexibility to developers to add quite things for AWS, Cloud Ray, JSON format, is not cool.
Right, but the issue that you still there, right? Where the issue is not necessarily the data, it's kind of passing the data. Like well-structured JSON is being passed.
It's some sense. But when you're accepting, for example, IPRs from the street people location, and then suddenly they will change it and they say, IPRs, they will lose, and something else in your finding. And our point is that always do this test and try the thing through. So make an event, and then overlay the checking from the logs, see if the event arrived in the way and you're able to parse it, you're able to analyze it, and then you know that. Okay, at least for historical data, probably you can do that very identical. And you need to constantly repeat it. AWS is a revolving track. If you think about your internal IT and internal development, these guys at least, they are breaking your logs on a regular basis, at least once per day.
I think one of the other things I could definitely say is to like a take home from anything is definitely do make sure your teams play with it. Do play with the logs, do have a look at seeing what stuff is actually happening. Because if you're just only dealing with the incidents that are reported when you're getting an alert, well, that is when your car alarm's going off and your car's being broken into. If you can see other stuff, and the only way you can do this is by being creative, just having a look, finding out questions. I was running a summer school in the July this year at the University of Cambridge with 3 weeks of people that were just not cybersecurity professionals in the slightest. But because they weren't doing everything that we did and they were just Googling and being creative, so far out of the 190 people they attempted to attack, we have a 100% success rate with people that aren't trained in cybersecurity. Whereas with my master's course of doing exactly the same thing that people have done cybersecurity, it's around about 52%. Because they're thinking differently and they're not, by inherently only doing the things that we've ever seen from a defending point of view, whereas they don't have any of this cloud fog really, so they're having an adventure.
Okay.
Great question. Go on.
Do you see any relationship between content and what it is today?
No, but if you're talking about S3 access points, then reverse engineering it external, how it works. In each region, it seems like they have private machines, so those S3 regions. In EU, West, whatever, the island region, my best estimate is that they have about 2,200 physical doses serving S3 regions. And then each hour they start collecting logs in each and every dose. And that's why it happens. Your first request is cache, and when the hour is over, they close the file and then start shipping the file to S3, and that takes another file to some amount of time. And they should, and I hope that actually for them it's still like, as they are caching the data anyways, they should help us, the users, and reduce the number of physical files in the S3 buckets. Having just a couple of events in one file is waste of resources, but remember, when you need to access data, the request equals money or AWS. And that's why it's in their interest to give or to produce much more files instead of 5 files per hour.
You're saying that they do.
Yeah. I'm not saying that. But I see business value behind this too, and I think a lot of it.
Okay, thanks.